Okay, welcome. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Jacobson. I serve as Deputy Director at American Society of Adaptation Professionals. I use she, her pronouns, and I and the rest of our staff team are so glad that you have joined us today for our event, Climate Change Adaptation as a Means for Economic Development, Strategies for Building Rural Climate Resilience and Workforce Capacity. All right. And as I mentioned before, we do have quite a large number of folks who are joining us today. So we still have some folks trickling in from the waiting room, but we are going to respect everyone's time and go ahead and get started here. So as I'm sure you're all aware by the title of the event and coming here today we're going to be centering the experiences of people in rural communities in our conversations. And I know that many folks who are joining us today live and work in rural communities, but some folks perhaps don't. And so I just want to take a moment at the top here to really encourage and invite folks to step up if you are someone who is a resident of a rural community and have lived experience to share in the context of our conversation. And of course, we're really excited to all learn from each other here, but perhaps consider stepping back a bit if you don't have that lived experience, so we can really center that in our conversations today. I also want to humbly and gratefully acknowledge the land and water that sustains me and the enduring relationship that the Anishinaabe and Wyandot peoples have to their native lands and waters in what is now called Ann Arbor, Michigan. And we are going to have a couple of chances for folks to introduce themselves throughout the day today in smaller groups and in the chat, so stay tuned for that. But first, let me walk you through briefly our agenda for today. You should have received the agenda in your email inbox this morning. But we can throw a link to that in the chat as well. But here we are at our welcome and event orientation, and we're really excited to hear later on in this welcome from Dr. Deborah Butler, ASAP's Executive Director. Then, as I alluded to, we're going to go into small group introductions and networking sessions where you'll have a chance to meet some of the folks who are here in this room and introduce yourself. And then, as hopefully you are aware by now, we are going to be spending a lot of our day in event tracks. So we'll have a chance to hear an overview of each of those tracks so that you can make an informed decision about where you want to go. And just a little preview of that, our tracks are Community-Defined Climate Resilience Needs with Dr. Deborah Butler, Developing the Climate Resilience Workforce with Maria Hart, Needs and Opportunities for Funding and Financing Climate Resilience Work with me, Rachel Jacobson, and Programming Options for Catalyzing Implementation of Climate Resilience Work with Mia Dozier, Kif Scheuer, Cole McMahon, and Annie Howley. Within those tracks, you're going to have a chance to learn about the work that ASAP and our partners have completed on that topic over the past couple of months, as well as share your insights on that topic through some facilitated discussion. We're going to have a couple of breaks throughout the day today, one before we move into our tracks and one after our tracks. And then one of our most important sessions today is going to be our track report outs. That's when everyone in the room will have a chance to hear key conversation themes from each track. And then finally, we're going to be going into some breakouts by regions. We'll invite you to join a specific conversation to apply the insights that you've gained from this event to place-based opportunities and needs in a region that's important to you. And then we will wrap up and end by 3:30 Eastern Time. If you need support throughout the day today, we invite you to send a private message on Zoom to Megan Putnam. And Megan is going to be sending things in the chat to you throughout the day today as well. She is our Zoom master. And so feel free to message Megan if you need any support. And then just 3 meeting norms that I want to go over. so that we can all have a productive, successful, and meaningful time together. The first is to be present, whatever that means to you. If you can have your video on, especially during small group discussions, we welcome that. But if you're a turn the video off and walk around the room kind of person, that works as well. We just hope that you'll be present with us today. I know it's a long day, but we do invite you to take care of yourself. We all know that screen fatigue is real. We're going to have 2 breaks today, but feel free to step away at other times if you need to as well. Again, if you are in a small group setting and you need to step away, maybe let folks know in the chat. We do want to foster a sense of camaraderie in those small groups, so try to be present and let folks know if you're stepping away. And then finally, take care to respect others. At ASAP, we really work to embody the values of trust and transparency. We're going to be upholding Chatham House rules today. So that means that you can feel free to share ideas outside of this room, but make sure to get permission before attributing those ideas to the speaker. And then finally, again, just mute when you're not speaking. We are in Zoom meeting format, which means that people can mute and unmute themselves at will. So please stay muted when you are not speaking. All right. Now, next, I want to go through a bit about American Society of Adaptation Professionals. I think for some folks, this is your first time joining us and perhaps your first time learning about who we are here at ASAP. We are a professional association and social impact network for climate change adaptation and climate resilience professionals, practitioners, students, scholars. Our network has close to 1,000 individuals and 45 organizations. Members come from all different sectors: public sector, private sector, nonprofit organizations, and academia, and all regions of the US and Canada, as well as the Caribbean. Together with our members and partners, we are advancing the field of climate change adaptation by learning from Western science, Indigenous knowledge, and the lived experience of those addressing climate impacts in their own communities. And we are, as I mentioned, really privileged to have 45 organizational members, an incredible group of that includes federal agencies, cities, engineering and planning firms, community-based organizations, and these organizations provide invaluable wisdom and support to the ASAP network. They work with us to advance the adaptation field, and they receive support from the network to advance their adaptation and resilience goals. Our programs here at ASAP are designed to build the capacity of our members to do effective adaptation work and work together to strengthen the adaptation field. Oh, skipping ahead. They're divided into 3 general areas: network support and peer learning, where you can meet people and explore new ideas; technical assistance and capacity building, where we are working with communities and organizations to catalyze adaptation action on the ground; and education and workforce development, where we are supporting members to excel in their jobs, find new opportunities, and define what it means to be working in the climate adaptation space. And our AmeriCorps State and National Planning Grant is really a unique opportunity because it is at the intersection of all 3 of those areas. So this spring, ASAP was fortunate to receive an AmeriCorps Planning Grant to address the intersection of climate resilience, workforce development, and economic opportunity in rural communities. And we were thrilled to have this opportunity to respond to what our members had been sharing with us about the need for more capacity building for climate resilience work in rural communities. This was an opportunity to build on existing relationships with folks working in national service and the workforce development space. And I want to particularly shout out our consultants on this project, Farallon Strategies and Nomad Planners. And it was an opportunity to design something that could bring more people and communities into the ASAP network to share their wisdom with our members and to get resources and support from the network. And we embarked on this planning grant journey in the spring. We've been working on initial program design, connecting with our network through a series of focus groups, as well as connecting with a ton of potential partners. And Deborah will talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And we are now in a pivotal point in our planning grant process where we are pausing to reflect and review the insights we've gathered so far as we prepare to launch into our more extensive program design phase. And with that introduction and context, I'm so pleased to turn it over to Dr. Deborah Butler, ASAP's Executive Director. to share some more words of welcome and centering for us. Deborah, I think you're on mute.
I am trying. I've had gremlins this morning. Good morning, everyone. And please excuse, I've had gremlins in my system, and so they were working against me, but Rachel did a very fine job of the welcome and introduction. My name is Deborah Butler. I'm the director, executive director of ASAP. And I want to talk just a little bit about the relationships that we've had with our consultants, with all of the states that we connected during the planning grant to AmeriCorps, its philosophy, system of government's service guidelines and objectives, and the recruitment process, and also a number of partnerships that we've engaged with over the last 4 to 6 months to understand what the needs are in rural communities and how we can address those needs. We've had a very strong process and have monitored that process and engaged it with our theory of change, with our network members, with the training that we have in our wheelhouse, also capacity building and fundraising. Next slide, please. This is the work in progress that we've done so far, and it's far from being finished. There are lots of blanks to fill in, and that is the purpose of this convening, to ask you to help us go through the rest of the process and to work towards filling in the areas where you have expertise and where we will find answers together to make an impact and access all of the resources that are available for rural communities over the next 6 months to 2 years. We've looked at regions in Appalachia, the states of Iowa, Michigan, Montana, Maine, Oregon, Colorado, and North Carolina, and have looked at what communities have told us. These are the relationships and critical needs that they've expressed that they would like to work on. And again, this has been, this information's been collected through a process of conversations, learning, listening, a lot of listening, and actually engaging with all sorts of communities throughout these regions. Next slide, please. And so this is an example of the community voices that were heard in Montana. This is one of the initiatives that was for the last year and a half for the Montana State University Extension. And these are one of the ways that local communities and their agencies, universities, extension services, nonprofits, state commissions have conversations with local communities to make sure that this process is actually designed by and for communities. There's a lot of listening. It's a very complex process, but communities know what they want and what they need. As we engage in this work, we understand that it's important to understand not only the histories of the people who live there, but the histories of the land and how climate change is impacting all of these ecosystems and different land masses, and how changes in the land impact changes in the community. So this is just one of the examples that we use and that we reference. Hopefully we will learn from you and you will learn from each other in ways that we can engage communities. It's the first part of understanding what communities need and what the impact should be in communities and how we can actually move into communities and have these things happen. What intervention should be based on community needs. This particular example focuses on 2 of the things that this community has identified, one of which is the built environment, the other is economic development. And so this gives us a pretty good idea of what our initial approach should be going into the state of Montana. So just want to, I don't know if Rachel has done this, but I would like to make an acknowledgement of the land and peoples where I currently live and work. I live in Northampton, Massachusetts, which is on the unceded lands of the Nonotuck people, which is the Connecticut Valley. And I acknowledge both their presence here and the integrity of their lands. So thank you. Welcome. Good to see everyone. And I will let Rachel continue.
Thank you so much, Deborah, for centering us in what we've already heard from communities themselves about how they want to move forward in climate resilience building. And I think that's going to really be a theme that carries us throughout the day. I am excited now to invite Jan Mays, who's one of the leaders of our Rural Regional Collaboratives Peer Learning Group here at ASAP, to share a few words. We're so grateful to have the Rural Regional Collaboratives Group just starting up with us this year. And it's been an incredible asset as we've been getting this project off the ground. And I'm so excited that the RRC leaders and members are joining us here today at the event.
Thank you, Rachel. My name is Jan Mays. I go by the pronouns of he and him, and I live in California in the Sierra Nevada region on the land of the Nisenan that has never been ceded. I am one of the co-facilitators for the Rural Regional Collaboratives Group. And as you said, Rachel, we are a brand new member-led interest group. We had our kickoff meeting last March. And we're currently looking at where our members' energies and interests are. But as our name implies, we are focusing on challenges and opportunities, climate change, mitigation, and adaptation in rural areas, and especially of how rural regional collaboratives can play a role. How are they formed? How do they function? How do they access finance and funding? How do they build their own capacity and that of their members, and many other items in our learning agenda that we're still trying to define. We're also trying to understand the unique characteristics of rural populations and groups in terms of their specific vulnerabilities, in terms of their livelihoods and assets, and their attitudes towards climate change and their access to information and so on. As you can see, quite a few items that are also reflected in today's agenda. We are very interested in participating today, and we will be looking at opportunities for continued learning and discussions and hopefully collaborations with this ASAP AmeriCorps program design. If you're interested in joining us, I hope someone can put in where you can register. You can also contact me directly or one of my co-facilitators. And lastly, we meet every third Tuesday of the month from 2 to 3 p.m. EST. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jan. Really wonderful to have an opportunity for continued learning. This does not have to be a one-time event. You can come every month and join the RRC group. With that, we are going to move into our networking breakouts. We'll have about 15 minutes in these breakouts. They will be self-facilitated. So with that in mind, I'm going to put some of our prompting questions here in the chat. As you'll see, based on the questions, we're really hoping that you'll lean into our network value of reciprocity and share something that you hope to give in the context of today's conversations and something that you hope to get in addition to kind of basic information about who you are. So with that, I think Megan is going to open the breakout rooms for us, and everyone will have a chance for about 15 minutes to get to know folks, other folks in the room. And just a quick reminder to make sure you are muted. Okay, I think we have everyone back. Welcome back. Hopefully that was a nice opportunity to meet some other folks in the room. And we will have a few more opportunities for that as well throughout our event today. Next, what we're going to do is introduce you to the different tracks available for this event so that you can make an informed decision about where you would like to spend the majority of your time today. So what we're going to do first is I have a slide up on the screen that has a very brief description of each track. And we are actually going to launch an initial poll to ask folks where you think you might want to go. This is going to help give us a little bit of a feel for which tracks might have a lot of interest, which tracks might have a little bit more focused or smaller interest. And ultimately, we are going to want to make sure that we can have a nice, somewhat even amount of people in each track. And so by doing this initial poll, just want to give folks a signal that if maybe you are interested in a track that a lot of other people are interested in, consider going to your second choice track instead. So you won't be assigned to a track, you will get to choose, but we're hoping that you'll make your choice in part based on this initial poll and help us in our goal of evening out numbers between the tracks. So let me give folks just a minute here to read the words on the slide, and then we will launch our poll. Okay, Megan, I think we are ready, and I am just going to give a hand to folks who maybe didn't have the opportunity to read their screen by reading out the track names. We've got community-defined resilience needs, developing the climate resilience workforce, funding and finance needs and opportunities, and programming options for catalyzing implementation of climate resilience work. All right. Great. So, oh, looks like a few people are still voting. Excellent. All right. I'm going to end the poll. We have some fairly evenly split interest, which is great. I think that if this represents your first choice, that that is great, and we should be able to accommodate everyone's first choice. But with that, we are going to launch into some brief track overviews from our track leaders so that you can get a little taste before you make your final decisions. And we're going to start with community-defined climate resilience needs with Deborah Butler.
Okay, can everyone hear me? I'm not sure.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Community-defined climate resilience needs is sort of the foregrounding of everything that we do in community. And it's the hardest part of the work, I think, because it actually involves developing relationships with and in communities prior to collaborative work. If you've ever lived or been in a rural or small community, you know how there are dynamics and relationships that may not appear very important on the surface, but understanding and being able to negotiate those relationships is incredibly important, particularly if you're not of and from that community. We will also talk about how unequal power dynamics and agency impact a community's engagement, participation, knowledge sharing, and cooperation, that in small communities, rural communities, there may be an established family or dynasty that sort of controls what happens in the town. And oftentimes progress is not the best part of their agenda. So understanding that's important. And so those are some of the things that we will talk about: how to manage priorities, narratives, communication, and consensus building, and how to incorporate lived experience in the work that you do. So that's what we will talk about in Climate Resilience Workforce, and I'm sorry, in Climate Resilience Community Defined Adaptation.
That was my fault because I
I
think
know
I
that
had
slide
a
just
little
popped up.
a little trigger happy on the slide there. Thanks so much, Deborah. And now
Sure.
we really will go to developing the climate resilience workforce with Maria Hart.
Okay, can you see me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Viteri Hart, and I'm based in Madison, Wisconsin. And I am, my company is called Nomad Planners, and I work at the intersection sometimes of transportation, climate change, and workforce development. And when I say workforce development, well, let me tell you what it means. It's the services, programs, networks, and the systems that provide people with education, skills development, and improved access to employment and advancement. It's workforce development is considered a form of economic development because by investing in the workforce, you are building the competitiveness of the region. Since climate change adaptation is an emerging occupation, it is important to build products so that we can communicate with other networks and other systems, like the educational system, the economic development system, and of course, the rural system. So one way we can communicate with these systems is to build an occupational profile. Today, we're going to walk through that draft occupational profile for the climate change adaptation and resilience specialists and look at the feeder occupations that we selected. Because adaptation is an emerging occupation, there are many other occupations that are taking on the skills needed to do the adaptation work. We'll review some analysis using these feeder occupations and get some feedback from you on this product, the feeders, and the approach we use for assessing the workforce in rural regions. This work is important to ASAP's planning grant because in my experience, the AmeriCorps system has not been part of their general workforce development system, nor does it adhere to any workforce conventions like credentialing. I expect this profile product will help accelerate partnerships for ASAP. Please join me in track 2.
Thanks so much, Maria. Okay, needs and opportunities for funding and financing climate resilience work. This is track 3, and it will be with me. So we, as part of our planning grant, we are developing a funding and finance assessment to support rural communities in building climate resilience. And the reason why we're doing this is because sustainable long-term climate resilience work in rural communities and everywhere requires holistic capacity building. So by doing a funding and finance assessment and creating this both as a resource for our eventual AmeriCorps, an eventual AmeriCorps program, as well as rural communities generally, is really critical for building that holistic capacity. And also, even though we have a lot more public funding that has come down the pike for climate resilience building, as many of us know, it's still insufficient and inaccessible. And we want to make sure that the funding and finance that rural communities are able to access for climate resilience building is working to both build their capacity overall, as well as eliminate existing investment disparities. And so what we're going to be doing in this track is looking at the initial funding and finance assessment outline that we've developed and talking about some emerging questions. So we're going to be addressing what challenges for accessing climate resilience funding and finance are rural communities experiencing, and particularly which of those challenges are similar to those experienced by other types of communities that have lower capacity and which are specific to rural communities. We're going to be talking about what strategies and actions are succeeding in increasing climate resilience funding and finance access for rural communities. What public funding opportunities are currently being used to advance climate resilience in rural communities, and what new opportunities are coming online that might be particularly promising for this, and really digging into, what makes them promising, and how we can make them more accessible. And then finally, what are important considerations about rural community context that may make particular funding and finance mechanisms such as grants, loans, bonds, et cetera, more or less appropriate or accessible in rural communities in particular. So join us for this track if you want to dive into all of those questions, and with a holistic capacity building lens. All right, and lastly, we have the programming options track.
Hey, everybody, this is Kip Scheuer. We have a large group of facilitators and team members on this track because we're wielding together a few different things. So it's myself from Farallon Strategies, Annie Howley from Farallon Strategies, Cole McMahon, and Mia Dozier from ASAP. I feel like we're doing like behind door number 4. You get choose this now, making our pitch for you all, but this is going to be a great track. What we're doing here is we're looking at the programming options for catalyzing implementation of climate resilience work. As you've heard throughout the morning, this is part of a larger effort to decide how ASAP moves forward in this space in support of the communities and issues that are coming up here. And so we're trying to work with you all to identify those opportunities. So we recognize, and you're probably here because communities in rural communities need help. And that help ranges from technical or administrative support to raw people power. There's a lot of ways that ASAP might provide that support, and it's not entirely clear what is going to be the most effective approach. So during our session, we're going to share about what we learned from our various efforts, and then gather input from you on those program options. So I want to turn it over to Mia briefly. We're going to just talk about what we did so you know what we're going to be sharing, and then we'll talk about the expectations before we hand it back to Rachel. Mia?
Thanks, Kif. Hi, everybody. Like Kif said, my name is Mia Dozier. I'm the training specialist at American Society of Adaptation Professionals. And one of the things that we did that we're really excited to share with you are the focus groups that Rachel mentioned earlier that we conducted with our peer member-led interest groups at ASAP. In these focus groups, we had over 400 participants that talked about addressing climate justice needs in rural communities. So in our presentation, we'll be talking about what ASAP members said in terms of understanding our collective problems facing rural communities, the needed inputs to address those problems, and activities that might fit well within an AmeriCorps program. We'll also be talking about what people are saying about desired outcomes, such as workforce development and resources for education and well-being. And then I'll pass it off to Kif again to talk about our session a little bit more.
So the other side, thank you, Mia. The other side of the work has been a lot of direct outreach with individuals, organizations in the service world and in sort of the associated organizational space. And we heard, as I noted, a lot of different needs and also some cautionary tales around programming supporting rural communities. So we've been spending a lot of time reflecting on this work through internal ideation and deliberations, and we want to share a little bit of what we're hearing as an invitation for you all to share with us as well. So we have a lot of questions about this work and where it's going to take ASAP. So that brings us here to today. As I said, we're going to share a little bit of what we've been hearing, and then we're going to start to listen to you. So just to refresh, the expectations for our track are going to be that, one, ASAP's going to walk away with a better understanding of what rural communities need functionally in this space. And participants, we hope, are going to walk away with a clearer understanding of the themes of what we heard, as well as what ASAP is thinking about they could provide to them over time and across the country. So with that, I hope you'll join us for track 4, and I'll pass it back to Rachel.
All right, thank you so much to all of our track leaders. I also want to give a big shout out to our small group discussion leaders in each of our tracks. We have some volunteers who are going to be leading small group discussions within each of these tracks. And we have some not as yet to be identified note takers in each of these tracks. So this is a really participatory event. And I hope, and I want to thank everyone who has already volunteered to support the tracks and everyone who will volunteer to support the tracks, perhaps as a note taker as we move forward. But now I want to turn it over in just a sec to Mia and Megan, who are going to explain how you can enter your track room. We are going to be using separate Zoom rooms for each track. That will enable us to then go into smaller discussion rooms later on in the day. I want to emphasize that after Mia and Megan tell you how to find your track room, the next thing on our agenda is a break. And I want to encourage everyone to join their track room and then take their break and stay in their Zoom room during their break, perhaps with your microphone and your camera off, so that we can all get started right away with our tracks as soon as breaks are over.